Well, good afternoon, fellow broadcasters and friends. We really appreciate you joining us for this special event, a press conference with the brand new, newly nominated and selected Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, Dr. Jewel Bronaugh. And it is a pleasure to have her on with us. She was appointed the Commissioner of Virginia Department of Agriculture back in 2018 and was appointed there by Governor Ralph Northam. And along with that, she also served as the Virginia State Executive Director of the USDA's Farm Service Agency, the FSA. And prior to her FSA appointment, she was the Dean of Agriculture at Virginia State University with oversight of extension and research and the academic programs. And previously to that, she was an associate administrator of the extension programs and the 4-H extension specialist. And it is a pleasure to have an extension, someone that really knows the importance of youth and agriculture and truly wants to speak to and for farmers. Ladies and gentlemen, our special guest today, Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, Dr. Jewel Bronaugh. Jewel, I think the very first question that we're going to ask you is to make sure that everybody knows how to pronounce your name. I've butchered it 2 or 3 times before we started.
Absolutely. And thank you, first and foremost, for having me today. It is a pleasure to be here. And I will start with the pronunciation of my name. It is a name, I think that my husband's, he's from Kentucky, but he has family in the Kansas City area. I think that name derives from somewhere in between those two locations. And it is pronounced Bronaugh, Bronaugh. So phonetically, Bruhnaw. So glad to be here today. I am in my 3rd+ week at USDA. I've been telling staff at USDA, it feels about like 3 months because this is a job that moves very quickly. But I am coming up to speed on a lot of things. Just a little bit of background about me. I am originally from Petersburg, Virginia. It's about 20 minutes south of Richmond, Virginia. I started out as a vocational high school teacher. So that's where I started my career. I do have a passion for young people, and I had a dream of becoming a college professor, and actually went on to do that for a couple of years. But I found myself in a job at Virginia State University as a 4-H youth development extension specialist. And when I made the step over into extension, I realized this is the type of work that I am super passionate about. And it landed me in the College of Agriculture at Virginia State University. And so, from there, I was fortunate enough to be able to continue that extension work and work my way up to becoming a dean. And, it was really a great opportunity. I've had years of state service in Virginia, but to have the opportunity to move from what we focused on at Virginia State, which was kind of the small scale niche crop, sustainable specialty crop production. I wanted to learn more about the commodity agriculture side. And so I had an opportunity in 2015 to serve as the state executive director of FSA for the state of Virginia. And it did expose me to incredible programs for farmers and ranchers through FSA, close work with NRCS and rural development at that time, expanded my outlook, and then to have the opportunity to serve as Virginia's Commissioner of Agriculture exposed me to a whole new area of work and partnerships with USDA, because departments of agriculture partner closely with USDA. Never in my wildest dreams did I have deputy secretary on my to-do list. I'd worked 26 years in the state of Virginia, and so I figured retirement may soon be coming. But to have this opportunity is just indeed an honor. And so since I have been confirmed, I've been working alongside Secretary Vilsack in advancing the priorities of the Biden-Harris administration. And those, of course, are focusing on things like climate change, really trying to deal with some of the health impacts of COVID, racial equity, and how we're going to build our rural economies back better. And have joined Secretary Vilsack in really focusing on those initiatives and others in terms of nutrition and other rural broadband and many others. So I'm excited to be here today. I serve as the Chief Operating Officer of USDA. So I'm closely engaged in issues like, personnel issues, IT issues. We're having lots of conversation about return to work. How do you return an agency of 90,000+ employees safely back to work after people have worked throughout the pandemic in a variety of ways? So those are some of the issues that I've been discussing today, but lots to do. No day is ever the same. I'm very excited about getting out. I want to visit offices. I want to visit various states, learn more about agriculture, work very closely with of course, the U.S. Forest Service is a part of USDA. A wildfire season is earlier and earlier each year, just learning more about the important work that we do, not only in fighting wildfires, but dealing with forest management issues. So there's a lot on my plate that I'm looking forward to, and certainly am happy to be here today. So thank you again for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Bronaugh, and especially as Deputy Secretary in your new role. I know that you've only been in that role for I think you said 3 weeks, but one of the coffee shop talks out here in the country, Dr. Bronaugh, is about climate smart farming. Have you had that kind of conversation with the Secretary of Agriculture yourself in regards to climate smart farming? A lot of farmers are thinking that they're doing quite a bit as being, in some cases, as much as they can conservation wise. Have you had that conversation with the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack?
Absolutely. We're having a lot of conversations about climate smart agriculture. A couple of things are foremost. And first of all, we have had many producers. We've had, our farmers and ranchers and landowners who have really been doing things that have protected our climate for years. And we have to acknowledge the great work that's been done for years. As we think about how we're going to take those practices that we've already been doing and advance those into meeting the goals that the administration has set around climate change. One, this is for USDA a whole of government effort to address the climate crisis. So a couple of things to be effective. One thing we know is we're going to have to work with our farmers, ranchers, and our landowners to engage. This is not something that will happen through regulation. We're going to have our farmers and ranchers and landowners closely engaged as we make decisions about practices and opportunities for our farmers and ranchers to really meet the climate change goals. So that's foremost. This is going to be farmer based. And that's going to be the beginning point of how we move forward. But as we think about the executive order and our whole of government effort to address this climate crisis, other things, we need to figure out how to measure, quantify, and track climate smart agriculture and forestry activities, develop a strategy that works for all of our producers and landowners. And we have existing USDA programs, CRP and EQIP, that we can leverage to ensure that we utilize those programs to assist farmers and ranchers. We need to support new and better markets, voluntary markets. You probably heard about carbon credits and a carbon bank. Again, as we make decisions about how we establish those, we will closely be engaging our nation's producers and how we do that in a way that is effective and creates bio-based market opportunities for farmers and ranchers. Also thinking about, I mentioned wildfires, how do we develop resilience strategies for addressing wildfires and managing our forests effectively? And of course, we're going to rely heavily on research at USDA. We think about what are other ways to ensure better soil health, for example, through research-based strategies. So those are all parts of the conversation that we're having. But again, we want to ensure that this is producer-based and that we also respect and utilize the ideas of many of our farmers and ranchers who have been doing these great practices for many years.
Very good. Dr. Bronaugh, a question coming in, and broadcasters, if you have a question, just go to the chat function and enter your name, and I'll try to get them in order. And if you wouldn't mind, when you ask the question, introduce yourself as the name and the network and or station that you represent. And we're going to start with Spencer Chase. Spencer?
Yeah, good afternoon, Deputy Secretary. Appreciate you making a little bit of time for us. As Gale mentioned, my name is Spencer Chase, and I work for AgriPulse Communications. So, in non-pandemic times, we actually have an office in the Witten building. So it's not out of the question that someday you and I might run into each other in the hallways or the parking lot. So, looking forward to having that happen. Wanted to ask about the announcement that we saw from USDA earlier this week on the $4 billion, I believe, Build Back Better funds was the technical name that they used for it. But wondering, we heard from some folks on that stakeholder call yesterday that USDA working on figuring out some of the specific, programs and activities and dollar allocations that will go along with that. Wondering what you can offer in terms of a timeline on how USDA plans to roll out those funds and make available some additional information on how that money is going to be spent.
Thank you. Great question. I know we made the recent announcement in investing the $4 billion to really strengthen and make our food system more resilient. I don't have the exact timeline, but I tell you what our plans are. Typically, we have the notice of funding availability, and then we begin to roll out the funding. And that funding will come in several pots. So we will have some funding to address food production. And that funding will come in terms of grants, training, and technical assistance for producers and essential workers. So that will be one pot. Another pot will address food processing, investments in new and expanded regional processing capacity. As we know, the pandemic really highlighted some of the challenges we have with having very few processors out here processing a lot of the meats that we eat. So really expanding local and regional processing capacity is going to really create a more resilient supply chain and food system. There will be another pot for food distribution and aggregation. So, people need the right infrastructure to get the food where it's needed. And so the system was really stressed again during COVID. So you had long shipping times for some products. And there was that lack of investment in local and regional processing. So we're gonna invest in food system infrastructure. And then the fourth pot will be kind of markets and consumers. So, it's amazing that the US spends, more money on healthcare than we do on food. But we want to make sure that people have access to markets, the small and mid-sized farmers. How do they have better access to markets? And also, we want to create expanded access to more markets. So those are the four pots of money that we have. We will be moving as quickly as we can to make the funding available. I apologize that I don't have the exact timeline, but I did want to share that we are prepared and in process of moving forward with making the money available.
Do you have a follow-up question, Spencer?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute myself there. I guess just in terms of a follow-up, then we're talking about $4 billion, but is that the last of allocations like this that we should expect to see? Because I know there was I believe this came from the pandemic bill earlier this year, but is this the last of kind of the food system strengthening announcements of this scale that we should expect to see from the department, or are there other efforts? Obviously you're going to be working to make sure there's food on plates every single day, but to the $4 billion variety, or should we be expecting to see that again?
I'm not so sure it'll come out in that magnitude, but we're looking at funding that was provided through pandemic assistance funding, but there's also, for example, $100 million that is available through the American Rescue Plan for states that had formerly participated in the Farmers to Families Food Box program. And so they can now participate in an emergency food network opportunity to help pantries build storage and refrigeration capacity. So that's additional funding that's available. We also had, $1 million to the Emergency Food Assistance Program that was recently released. So there are other pots of money. I would dare say we may not roll out as much as $4 billion, but I would imagine that there is some funding to come as we see increased needs for trying to address and fix our food system.
Any other questions from broadcasters? As a question from a farmer itself, Dr. Bronaugh, a lot of our FSA and a lot of our information is being done on computers and through the internet. Are you doing extra special steps, especially during some of the hacking going on, most recently with the JBS and then the Colonial pipeline? Is there special precautions being done now to protect the farmers' information through the FSA and the USDA locally?
That's a really great question, and I can clearly understand. We house a lot of private and sensitive data at USDA regarding farmers and ranchers, and that's both information we obtain from them and information we provide to them. And the JBS ransomware attack, was just another. You mentioned the Colonial pipeline. That really underscored the risk of a consolidated food system. So we learned some lessons about how we need to invest to be better equipped for some of these challenges, because we need to prepare for them, because it's not if the next attack occurs, it's when. I mean, we were lucky with the JBS situation that it was not worse, but we are having conversations. I just had one yesterday about how we are going to ensure that we have a strong system within USDA, that we can bolster the capacity to make our system strong so they are resilient to those cyber attacks. We're going to go through a process within the next 4 months. One, how do we add two-factor authentication to make sure that there aren't any vulnerable spots, and not only within FSA, but within the other program areas of USDA. So we're going to start there in terms of internal protections. We will be implementing internal protections. We're also going to think about work with other agencies in terms of how do we ensure we're sharing information in a way that we can all protect that information, but we can also have an alert system for when there is an attack or a vulnerable spot and information gets out. But the answer is we are currently working as we speak on our IT systems within USDA to ensure that they are strong and they're resilient against cyber attacks.
Thank you. Other questions? Come online or send your name to the chat function and I'll get you on. Other questions? Another question, just recently, I think just as of today, I guess the curiosity came about the connection and the being at the table with the EPA from the USDA. There was just a recent one. They were going to be changing some of the rule of the waters of the U.S. And will you and Secretary Vilsack have a pretty well have a seat at the table when EPA is going through this, representing farmers?
Good question. We work closely not only with EPA and FDA, and when you're talking about issues like waters of the U.S., we want to make sure at all times that when decisions are made by partnering agencies that could adversely affect our farmers and ranchers, that we want to be at the table, and we are always at the table. So that is a mechanism that we have within government, that we pick up the phone or we sit together and we talk about what the decisions mean for the people who are impacted by USDA and of course around agriculture. So we fully expect to be at the table to have the discussion. I've read about the article, of course, this morning. And there's a lot to discuss around waters of the USDA as we go forward. So on this issue and other issues, we will be at the table. Personally, the deputy secretaries, in addition to the secretaries in the president's cabinet, we get together on a regular basis. And one thing that Secretary Vilsack has said to me is, do not be afraid to speak up. So I see it in my role that when decisions are made that adversely affect American agriculture, it is my job to speak up. So yes, we fully intend to be at the table.
Other questions? Dr. Bronaugh has still a few more minutes to share with us. Do you have other questions?
I did, while we're waiting on another question, and thinking about kind of our exports, and we look at our exports and our agricultural trade, and I'm just really happy to say, our quarterly ag trade forecast projects farm exports at 164 billion. That's a 21% increase over farm exports last year. So, in terms of ag trade, we've proven to be extraordinarily resilient, especially during a global pandemic. And estimates show that our ag trading partners are responding to a return of certainty and reliability within the U.S. And specifically, when you think about a surge of exports, we've seen that in our exports to China, where there are increased volumes, higher commodity prices. We've seen the exports increase in corn, soybeans, sorghum, and on the animal side, it's been beef and pork. We also, of course, have a lot of trading relationship with Canada, Mexico, Japan, and the EU. So I did want to report that we're looking really good on the farm export side of things.
Any questions? Go to the chat function, enter your name, and I'll get to you. A question, Dr. Bronaugh, the differences between the current administration at the USDA and the former one. Sonny Perdue, as the Secretary of Agriculture, was always in the country, visiting with farmers and ranchers and actually processors as well. Do you and Secretary Vilsack plan on kind of following that lead? And what differences do you see in the previous USDA administration and the one with you and Secretary Vilsack?
So the answer to your first question is yes, and absolutely. When I was a commissioner of agriculture, we had an opportunity to engage very closely with Secretary Perdue. He is a very personable person. He loves agriculture, and that always came through when we had an opportunity to meet with him. Secretary Vilsack is always trying to get out and about. And for me, that's the favorite part of what I like to do. When I was nominated for this position, one of the things that I said early on was that when I was in the FSA SED, I made it my point to visit every field office in the state of Virginia within my first year of SED, and I accomplished that. I wanted to see how people were interacting at the counter with the county executive director and staff. What was it like? How were these decisions affecting our farmers and ranchers? I've always visited, and it's the favorite part of my job. So as I am able to do so, I fully intend, and so does Secretary Vilsack, to make visits, to visit with our nation's farmers and ranchers and landowners, rural communities I've never been to. It helps me in my decision making, and absolutely honored when I have an opportunity to do so. So I certainly look forward to that. And Secretary Vilsack, he's in Iowa right now, so he comes back and forth to DC, but I looked on his calendar and he's got a lot of visits planned on his calendar. So we look forward to getting out throughout the countryside.
Jewel, when do you expect to be back at the USDA? I know that you are still at home. Secretary Vilsack is still in Iowa. When do you expect to be in the USDA?
What a great question. We're still, as of today, and this may change tomorrow, we're still at a 25% work capacity. So you can't have any more than 25% of your staff in the office at one time. But we're talking immediately about how we're going to change that. So we actually have a report due to the White House, and this is all of federal government on July 19th of what our return to work is going to look like. We have to have the plan in then. That's not when everyone will return to work, but we will submit our plan to the White House for what that will look like. For USDA, we're such a unique agency and organization because we have so many different functions across USDA. I mean, you have FSIS inspectors who have never they don't have the opportunity to telework. And we have other positions that are able to telework full time. So we're making those considerations. And we're doing it from a bottom-up approach, meaning we want our agency levels to tell us what the best and safest return to work is going to look like. So over the next couple of months, we will be phasing in a return of work with no specific date as of yet, but hopefully things will start to look different in the fall.
Last chance, broadcasters, if you have a question, come on with me, send me your name, and we'll try to get it. We're running just real close on time. Looking. A question about how are you doing in filling the positions in Kansas City for the NAFA and the ERS? Vilsack had mentioned it as a priority early on.
Yes, it is a priority. And that's something that I will be, in my role as Deputy Secretary, paying close attention to. Just being 3 weeks in, I have a lot to learn. I do have some initial data and information, but I understand what a priority it is. There was a loss of staff when those functions, ARS and NIFA, moved to Kansas City. And so we have to rebuild that science base and that research base back. It's critical. It can sometimes be challenging because those positions are very unique and special, and the education and training behind them are as such. But it is very much a priority. As we know, we have to make science-based decisions in the work that farmers and ranchers do, but we need the staff to be able to assist with that. So I have that as one of the things that I'm starting on, and I will begin with trying to figure out how to get back staff as quickly as possible very soon. And as I travel, I do the recruitment spiel. That's where I got the skill as a dean. So I'm going to use my old dean skills to try to recruit the best and the top talent we can bring to the agency.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, our time is done with the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, Dr. Jewel Bronaugh, and we really appreciate all of you joining us. And I might say that this was kind of a part of the Washington Watch Committee's move to reach out to the new Deputy Secretary. And unfortunately, Susan Littlefield, the chair of the Washington Watch Committee, could not be with us. But we really appreciate all of you all joining us. And Dr. Bronaugh, it's a pleasure to have you with us. As broadcasters, we're telling the word, and it's from trusted friends of agriculture. These broadcasters are telling the story, and reach out to us anytime. And you're always welcome. You and Secretary Vilsack are welcome at our national convention in Kansas City later on this year, and you'll be hearing more about that. But thank you, Dr. Bronaugh, for being with us. I appreciate it, and we wish you the best there at the USDA.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to visiting with you again soon.
Very good. Thank you, Jewel Bronaugh. Dr. Jewel Bronaugh, the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, with us today here on NAFB Report. Thank you so much, folks. We really appreciate you, and also appreciate Michaela for helping to set us up, along with Susan Littlefield, who worked towards this goal. We are going to be trying to have more of Washington Watch from the USDA, different positions and functions. And Tom and Susan Littlefield, as the chairman of the Washington Watch, are continuing to look at that. We will be getting information to you as to when those interview uh, Zoom meetings will be held and what time, etc. So encourage each other and ask questions. You always want to talk with these people, so ask questions. Thank you, folks. I appreciate you joining us, every one of you, and appreciate Tom for orchestrating this as well back at the main office. Thanks, folks. With that, we'll end this press conference. Thanks, all.